Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf 38, Daf Lamed Ches of Masechta Pesachim. On today's Daf, we discuss ownership of mayser sheni and what the nafkaminas are about that. Okay? Chala of mayser sheni, chala of things that are bought with the money that was once transferred from mayser sheni. Okay? Matzah from sounds like somebody's in a rush to get somewhere. Anyways, so matzah from like the chalas of a toda or the wafers of a nazir. That'll kind of take us to the end. So you'll notice I got a new notebook today. Thank God we filled up another notebook here at Babylon Talmud. We had to start a new notebook. This might be my third notebook or something. Each notebook has 100 pages in it. So, sounds about right. We're up to episode like 300, almost like 365. It's coming up pretty soon, I think. A whole year, Cheve. We've been learning a daf of Gemara every day together for a whole year already. Isn't that insane? Alright, we're going to start on daf Lam Zayin and Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. Amr of Asi. Said Rav Asi. Which Rav Asi do you think this is? No, Adam Friedman, what do you think? Remember Masechta Shabbos? Adam, what daf was it? Maybe you could tell us what daf it was. We had a whole shtickle Torah dart in the WhatsApp, and Adam, you brought a note from the Koran Gemara that there were a few different Rav Asis. There was Rav Asi who was a Talmud Chaver of Rav. There was Rav Asi who was like Rabbi Amin Rabbi Asi. So anyways, there were a few Rav Asis apparently. Anyways, so I think there was also Rav Asi in Bavel, maybe. Rav Asi, says Rav Asi, Isa shel mayser sheni. Okay, so a dough made from mayser sheni, meaning you have, let's say you have mayser sheni, you have a field and you have a bunch of stuff, you separate truma, mayser sheni, take the mayser sheni to Yerushalayim, so let's say it's wheat, and then you grind it up into flour, you make the flour into dough. Okay, so it's dough of mayser sheni. So divrei Rav Meir p'turim min hachala. So according to Rav Meir, well, it doesn't say according to Rav Meir, it says based on what Rav Meir says. What does Rav Meir say? So Rashi points out that Rav Meir says that mayser mammon gavohu, that mayser sheni is not your money, it's not yours, it's God's. It's God's money. And therefore, if it's not yours, then it'll be patur from chala, as we're going to see in just a moment. The divrei chacham chayevas b'chala. Now, according to the chacham, who said that it's not mammon gavoha, it's yours, well then you would have to separate challah. Matzah shel mayser sheni. When it comes to matzah, what if you take mayser sheni wheat, let's say, and you bake it into matzahs? So divrei Meir ein adam yotzei b'yidei chavasu b'Pesach. So according to Meir, you would not be yotzei your chiyuv of achilas matzah with that matzah on Pesach if it was from mayser sheni. Divrei chacham yotzei b'yidei chavasu b'Pesach. However, according to the chacham, you would be yotzei your chiyuv achilas matzah with matzah of mayser sheni. Esrig shel mayser sheni. What if you have a citron field, and an esrig field, and you take mayser sheni from the field, and you want to use that esrig of mayser sheni as your esrig? So divrei Rav Meir in yotzei b'yidei chavasu b'yom tiv. According to Rav Meir, who says that mayser is mammon gavoa, you would be unable to use that esrig on Sukkot. According to Chacham, a person can use an esrig of mayser sheni on Sukkot. It says Yom Tiv. I wonder if there's like a diuk there, meaning the first day of Yom Tiv when it's midoraisa. I don't know. Let's go weiter. Why should we try to be fancy? Fine. So what did we just say? So we just said that according to Rav Meir, who says that mayser is mammon gavoa, belongs to God, you would be unable to use mayser sheni for matzah. It would be patur from chala. You'd be unable to use it for your esrig. Maskeflar of Papa. So Papa asks the kasha, b'shlama isa. I understand why a dough made from mayser sheni grain would be patur from chala. How come? Dichsev arisosechem mishalachem. Well, because by challah it says reishis arisosechem, it has to be your dough. And if Reb Meir is saying that mayser is mamun gavoa, belongs to God, it doesn't belong to you. So if it doesn't belong to you, it's pater from challah. Okay, I get that. Esrig nami, I also understand why you can't use an esrig of mayser sheni if we say it's mamun gavoa. Dichsev l'kachtem lachem, lachem mishel lachem yehei. That it says l'kachtem lachem b'yom harishon, they have to take for yourselves on the first day of Sukkot. So it needs to be yours. And if mayser sheni doesn't belong to you, if it belongs to God, so then you can't use it for an esrig. Okay, I get it. I get esrig, I get challah. Ela matzah. But what's the story with matzah? Miksiv matzaschem? Does it say anywhere matzaschem? It has to be your matzah? No, it doesn't. So even if Reb Meir is going to say that mayser sheni belongs to God and not to you, it's not like the matzah needs to belong to me anyway, so why can't I use it? Omar Rava, v'tem Rav Yemar bar Shlamya. Who's Rav Yemar bar Shlamya? I mean, he comes up from time to time, but who is he? I don't know. Asya lechem lechem. So he says, so Rava, some say Rav Yemar bar Shlamya says that we can actually make a gzeir shava from matzah to challah. Ksivhacha lechem oni, it says by matzah lechem oni. Uksifasm, it says by challah v'aya ba'achalchem mi lechem ha'aretz. It will be when you eat from the lechem of the land. So just like by challah, it needs to be yours, and if it isn't, it's pater from challah. So also by matzah, it needs to be yours, and if it isn't yours, you're not yotze your chiyuv achilas matzah on the first night of Pesach, and therefore we're going to say that according to a Meir, who says that mayser is mamun gavoa, belongs to God, you would be unable to use matzahs made with mayser sheni grain on Yom Tif, on the first night of Pesach. You guys got that? Good. Weiter. So let's say that the following supports Rav Asi's assertion. Right? Rav Asi was the one who said what we just said, that according to a Meir, you'd be unable to use mayser sheni for matzah, you'd be pater from challah, you'd be unable to use it for esrig. Well, here we have a brisa, Isa shel mayser sheni. If you have dough of mayser sheni, p'tur min challah, divrei Rav Meir. Ha. So we see in this brisa that a dough of mayser sheni would be pater from challah according to Rav Meir. Perfect. The Chacham who say that the mayser sheni belongs to you, it's your mammon. So you'd be able to, so you would be chayiv in challah. What do you mean? Let's say that this supports Rav Asi. This is not just supporting him; it's literally saying exactly what he said. So this is what the Gemara is saying. Lema, let us say that the pligi beisa, that yes, just like it's clear that Reb Meir and the Chachamim argue when it comes to dough, that Reb Meir says that since mayser is mamun gavoa, it's not yours, and therefore it's pater from challah. The Chachamim say it's chayiv in challah. So nami plige, bahanach nami plige. So let's say that just like they argue by challah, so they would also, Reb Meir and the Chacham would also argue by matzah, by esrig, odilma, or perhaps shiny asam. That it's different when it comes to challah. How come challah would be different? How come they would maybe only argue by challah but not by matzah and esrig? Because by challah, Itaka says arisosechem twice. Where does it say arisosechem twice? Well, let's read it. It says reishis arisosechem challah tarimu truma kestrumas goren kentarimu osa reishis arisosechem tidnu lashem truma l'darasechem. So we see that it says arisosechem twice, reiterating the fact that it needs to be yours. So it's possible that maybe Reb Meir would say that only challah is pater by mayser sheni because we reiterate how important it is that it needs to be yours. But maybe matzah and esrig, maybe you can get away with it even if it's not yours. So maybe you can use mayser sheni. So therefore we said lema misayele. So let's say that this supports Rav Asi, because even though yes, this brisa is certainly supporting his assertion by challah, but can we necessarily say that we can apply this machlokas also to matzah and to esrig? Okay. By Reb Shimon ben Lakish. So Reb Shimon ben Lakish asked the question. Aha. What do you guys say? If you have mayser sheni in Yerushalayim, let's say you have wheat of mayser sheni. Okay. And then you make that wheat into a dough, into a flour, into a dough. And then you separate challah from that dough. So now a Kohen is allowed to eat challah, of course. The challah goes to the Kohen. And we also said in our Mishnah on Daf Lamed Hey that a Kohen is allowed to make matzahs from challah because he's allowed to eat it. However, here's the thing. We said that by mayser sheni, right, we said that matzah needs, right, b'chol moshvosechem tochlu matzahs, that you have to be able to eat matzah anywhere. Now, we were concerned about mayser sheni, that maybe that wouldn't fit the bill, right? Maybe mayser sheni b'Yerushalayim, right? If I schlep my mayser sheni to Yerushalayim, once it gets into Jerusalem, I have to eat it there. I can no longer take it out. I can't be poda it anymore. I have to eat it in Jerusalem. So we thought maybe to say that mayser sheni b'Yerushalayim you should not be able to use for matzah because you can't eat it anywhere. You have to eat it in Yerushalayim. We then said, no, because if the mayser sheni becomes tameh, then you'll be able to be poda the mayser sheni onto money, and then that mayser sheni will be chulin, and you can then eat it anywhere. However, here's the thing. If we take this mayser sheni and make it into dough and then separate challah, well, that challah, in practice, is never going to be able to be eaten outside of Jerusalem. Because the only way that mayser sheni in Jerusalem would be able to be eaten outside of Jerusalem is if it becomes tameh, and then you would redeem it and make it chulin, and then you can eat it wherever you want. That would not apply to challah, because challah is a kind of truma. And therefore, if the challah becomes tameh, it's truma tmeya, in which case you would never be able to, you wouldn't be able to eat it. You would have to burn it. In which case, so if you have mayser sheni that becomes challah, that you make into challah, so then there's really no way that you're ever going to be able to eat it outside of Jerusalem. The only way that you would be able to eat mayser sheni in Yerushalayim outside of Jerusalem, meaning once mayser sheni has been brought to Jerusalem, the only way to be able to eat it would be to, if it becomes tameh, and then you can be poda and eat it outside of Jerusalem. But if it's challah tameh, you just have to burn. There's really no chance you're going to be eating this challah of mayser sheni outside of Jerusalem. So maybe then you should be unable to use challah of mayser sheni for matzahs. Wow, what do you guys think? You guys probably say just go to the supermarket and just buy like matzahs like everybody else, right? That's definitely one solution, but still we want to know. By Reb Shimon ben Lakish, so Rish Lakish asked, can a person, really a Kohen essentially, be yotzei yischiyuv achilas matzahs with matzah that was made with challah of mayser sheni in Jerusalem? Whew. So now, Reb Yossi Aglili lo tibailach. Okay, so now, obviously, according to Reb Yossi Aglili, the answer is no. Because if you remember from, I don't know, what daf was it? Lamed Hey, I think. Rabbi Yossi Aglili had said that you're unable to use, maybe it's Lamed Vav, you're unable to use, I don't know, let's look it up. Lamed Vav. So, Rabbi Yossi Aglili says that the pasuk says, Lechem Oni, and he wants to learn that with an aleph, that you have to be able to eat it as an onein, and mayser sheni you can't eat it as an onein. So according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, there's no chance that you can use this challah of mayser sheni for matzahs. No way, Jose. Okay. Hashte b'chulin lo nafik b'chalosim ibaya, meaning in just regular mayser sheni, you'd be unable to use it for matzahs. Obviously, you'll be unable to use mayser sheni that's also challah for matzahs. The question is really according to Rabbi Akiva, because bechulin hu denafik. So Rabbi Akiva says that you're allowed to use regular mayser sheni for matzahs. Because if regular mayser sheni becomes tameh, then you'll be able to be poda it onto kesef, and then you'll be able to eat, buy other mayser sheni with that money, and then this particular mayser sheni you'll be able to eat elsewhere. So we see that there is a way that you'll be able to eat mayser sheni outside of Jerusalem, i.e. if it becomes tameh. So therefore, we can consider it to be b'chol moshvosechem. Aval, challah, But this mayser sheni that you then made into dough and separated as challah, the imitamya, that if it would become tameh, leisla heter b'moshavos v'lisreifa azla, there's no chance that you would be able to eat it outside of Jerusalem, because if it becomes tameh, you're going to have to burn it. So lo nafik, so you wouldn't be able to be yotze, because this particular dough, there is no chance that it will ever be eaten outside of Jerusalem. If it's tahor, you're going to have to eat it in Jerusalem because it's mayser sheni. If it's tameh, you have to burn it because it's truma, because it's challah. O dilma, aminun hoil. Isn't this interesting? Or maybe we could say since what? Hol v'ilu lo kara alei shem. Well, since if you wouldn't have made this particular dough into challah, if you would have kept it with the rest of the dough and made some other dough challah, v'itame, and then it would have become tameh, isla heter b'moshavos, you would be able to then pode it and eat it outside of Jerusalem, v'nafik ba, and you would be able to be yotze your chiv matzos with it, hashtanami nafik, maybe therefore you'll also be able to use it now. Meaning, since, so yes, it's true. This particular challah of mayser sheni, you will never be able to eat outside of Jerusalem. However, if you wouldn't have made this particular part of the dough challah, if you would have made some other part of the dough challah, well then this challah, you would have been able to potentially eat outside of Jerusalem if it became tameh. So therefore maybe we'll say that even the challah itself, you would be able to use for matzahs. Okay, alright, fine. And it's okay, we didn't answer. It's avamina. Okay, let's go weiter. Ikadamer, that those who say havada lo tibaylach, this is certainly not a question. Devade aminan hoil. Certainly, you can eat the challah of mayser sheni v'Yerushalayim, because we'll say hoil. Yeah, we'll say that. We will say that. We'll say that since if you would have made some other part of the dough into challah and left this as regular mayser sheni, then you could potentially eat it out of Jerusalem. So therefore, even now, you can use it for matzahs. But here's the real question. Kiti bailach, what you need to ask is challah halakoach bekesef mayser sheni v'aliba dera. Okay. Challah halakoach bekesef mayser sheni. Things are getting more exciting. Not too much more exciting, just one step further exciting. Let's say we're not talking about where you schlepped your actual mayser sheni to Jerusalem. Rather, Baruch Hashem, you have a big field and it was too much of a schlep to take your produce to Jerusalem. So instead you transferred their value onto money, and instead you took some money to Jerusalem. And then you took that money in Jerusalem and you bought food in Jerusalem. And that is now food that you purchased with mayser sheni money. Let's say you purchased wheat with mayser sheni money. And then you made it into flour, into dough, and you separated challah. So that's what we're talking about. So we're not talking about the challah of mayser sheni. We're talking about the challah that was separated from dough, that was made from grain, that was purchased with the money that was initially transferred from your mayser sheni. Got it? Good. Weiter. Now, according to the rabbis who say that if something that was purchased with the money of mayser sheni becomes tameh, you could be podeh it, well then it's basically no different than mayser sheni itself, that if it becomes tameh, you could be podeh it. And it would be okay. So, since they say yipodeh, since they say that something that, food that was purchased with mayser sheni money, if it becomes tameh in Jerusalem, you could just be podeh, well then hainu mayser. It's the same thing as the mayser sheni, that if it becomes tameh, you could be podeh, and therefore if the challah came from mayser sheni or from something that was bought with the money from mayser sheni, it would be the same thing. We would say hoil, and it would be okay. Kiti ba'ilach, but the question is, aliba Rabbi Yehuda, the Amr Yikaver, that according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says that if you have something purchased with money of mayser sheni, and it becomes tameh, you can't be podeh, you have to bury it. So in that case, so if you have this thing that you buy with mayser sheni, so even if it becomes tameh, even if the mayser sheni, if this thing that you bought with the mayser sheni itself became tameh, you wouldn't be able to be podeh and eat it outside of Jerusalem. So there's really no chance that this stuff is going to be eaten outside of Jerusalem, right? Meaning, you took this money into Jerusalem, you now purchased food with it. Now this food you have to eat in Jerusalem. And if it becomes tameh, then you have to bury it. And if you make it into challah, well then you still can't take it out of Jerusalem because it's food that was purchased with money of mayser sheni. So you can't take it outside of Jerusalem. And if it becomes tummy, then you have to burn it because it's truma. So there's pretty much no chance, not pretty much, there is no chance that this food is ever going to be able to leave Jerusalem. So the Tanan al-Koyach bekesef mayser sheni, as we learn in the Mishnah, that food that was purchased with the money of mayser sheni shenitma that became tummy yipade, you can redeem it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Yukaver, whereas Rabbi Yehuda says no, you have to burn it. You have to bury it. So now, the only way that we could possibly argue that you'd be able to make matzos with this challah that was separated from dough that was made by grain that was purchased with money that was from mayser sheni would be in the following way. Mi'amrinan ho'il v'ilo lakoach have v'ho'il v'lo kara alei Hashem v'itame yesh lohet b'moshavos v'nafik bey hashta nami nafik bey odil machad ho'il amrinan trei ho'il lo amrinan. You guys got that? Let's read it again. Mi'amrina, do we say that basically double ho'il? Ho'il number one is that ho'il v'ilo lakoach have. Well, if this wasn't food that was purchased with money that was from mayser sheni that was transferred onto money, but rather if it was simply mayser sheni itself, if instead of transferring the mayser sheni onto money and then taking the money to Jerusalem, you would have schlepped the mayser sheni itself to Jerusalem, if that would have become tameh, then you would be able to be poded, right? So that's ho'il number one. Ho'il v'ilo lakoach have, that since if you wouldn't have purchased this food with money of mayser sheni, but if you would have actually schlepped the mayser sheni itself, the ho'il number two is that v'lo kara alei shem, and if you wouldn't have made this part of the dough into challah, i.e. you would have made some other part of the dough into challah. So basically, if you would have had a situation where instead of purchasing grain with money of mayser sheni, you actually schlepped the grain that was mayser sheni itself, and then you made it into flour and you made it into dough, but then you didn't separate this particular part of the dough as challah, you separated a different part of the dough as challah. Well then, v'itame, if this dough became tameh, yesh lohet b'moshavos, you'd be able to be podeh and you would be able to eat it outside of Jerusalem, v'nafik bey, and you'd be able to therefore be yotzei your chiyuv matzah, hashta nami nafik bey. So therefore now it would work even when it's something that was purchased with money of mayser sheni that you made challah. Or maybe we could say one ho'il, right? Which is that if you simply schlepped your mayser sheni food into Jerusalem and then made it into challah, so we could say one ho'il was just, since if this particular part of the dough wouldn't have been challah, if it would have been some other part of the dough, well then this part of the challah would be able to be eaten outside of Jerusalem if it became tameh. So maybe we say chad ho'il aminam, we could say one ho'il, trei ho'il lo aminam. We don't say double ho'il, which is what you would have to say when it's grain that was purchased with money that was from mayser sheni that you transferred its value onto money. So Amarav mistavish mayser chadu. Boom. Rava says, look, it's all one halacha for mayser, and therefore, if you schlep your mayser sheni to Jerusalem, and we're saying that you're allowed to make matzos with mayser sheni in Jerusalem, because if mayser sheni becomes tummy, you could just be podeh and eat it outside of Jerusalem. Well then, we're not going to complicate things. We complicated things enough in getting to this point. Let's not complicate things and say that if you can make matzos with mayser sheni, you could also make matzos with challahs of mayser sheni. With challah of mayser sheni, you can also make matzos with challah that was separated from dough that was purchased with money from mayser sheni that was transferred. It's all good. Make your matzos, eat them, enjoy them. So, weiter. So in our Mishnah we had said something very interesting, which is that if you have your korban toda, now of course, as we've said a few times over the past few days, a korban toda was a korban that you brought to say toda, to say thank you, right? In situations, right? It's like when we would say birkas hagomel nowadays, so you'd bring a korban toda. Now, with the korban toda, there were 4 different types of breads that were brought. Three of them were matzah. One of them was mamish glutinous bread, although matzah also has gluten. but geschmack, bread. Okay, chometz. So we had said in the Mishnah that that when it comes to like the matzahs from the korban toda or these wafers of the nazir, so if he made them for his korban, so then you can't use it for matzah, for on Pesach, right? For your chiyuv matzah. But if you made it to sell to people who need it, well, then you can use it for your chiyuv korban, for your chiyuv matzah. So we're really going to get to that particular distinction at the end of the daf. But this is what we're talking about. So now the Gemara, we're going to see a machlokas between Rabba and Rav Yosef about how come you can't use the matzahs from a korban toda or from the rikike nazir for matzah. So here we go. You guys ready? Minanimili, how do we know that you can't use these matzahs for your chiyuv achilas matzahs on Pesach? Amar Rabba, the Amar Krua, Rabba says because the pasuk says ushmartem es hamatzahs, that it says in the pasuk that you have to guard the matzahs. Matzah mishtameres l'shem matzah, that you need matzah that was guarded specifically for the mitzvah of matzah. Mistama, this is where matzah shmuras come, right? Shmura matzah comes from. Mistama, right? Shmartem matzah matzahs. You have to guard the matzahs, I assume. I don't know. Anybody know? Anybody wanna? I don't know. What do you guys think? Yotzes hazot, to the exclusion of the matzahs from a korban toda or a kike nazir, she'ed mishtameres l'shem matzah el l'shem zevach, that they are not being guarded for the intention of matzah, rather for the intention of whatever korban, the toda or the kike nazir. Rav Yosef Amar, Rav Yosef says from a different pasuk. Amar Kra, the pasuk says shivas yomim tochlu matzahs, that you're going to eat matzah for 7 days. Matzah nechelas shivas yomim, so we need matzah that's edible for 7 days. Now, of course, korbanos have a half-life. Yotzes hazo, to the exclusion of these korbanos she'einen nechelas shivas yomim el liyom v'layla, that are not eaten for 7 days, rather for a day and a night. Right? I don't know about these rikike nazir, but certainly the lachmei toda, korban toda, is eaten for 1 day and 1 night. We need matzahs that can be eaten for 7 days. Okay, so that's machlokes between Rabba and Rav Yosef. The Rabba says that the matzahs dafka have to be guarded for the intention of matzah and not for anything else. Rav Yosef says that they have to be edible for 7 days, not just 1 day and a night. Okay. Wow, the sirens. I feel like I'm back in Jerusalem. I work with people in Jerusalem, and whenever I have calls with them, there's like still sirens going on in Jerusalem all the time. I guess they haven't stopped. Wow. I think maybe I'll pause the video for a minute until this passes. Yeah, ever since my friend next door started playing basketball while I was recording, so I started putting in earplugs, but they only work to an extent, Tana kavase de Rabba, v'tana kavase de Rav Yosef. So we have a brisa conveniently supporting Rabba and Rav Yosef. Oh, there's more sirens. All right, whatever. I feel like going weiter. Tana kavase de Rabba. Here's the brisa supporting Rabba. Yachol yetze adam. Yachol yetze yidei chavasu b'chalas toda rikike nazir. Is it possible that a person can be yotze is chiyuv achilas matzahs with the matzahs from a korban toda or the rikike nazir? Tamaloma ushmartem es matzahs. It says ushmartem es. You have to guard the matzahs. Matzah mishtameres l'shem matzah. You need matzah which is guarded for the intention of matzah. Yotzes hazo she'enim mishtameres l'shem matzah l'shem zevach. Oh, to the exclusion of these matzahs which are not intended for the matzah on Pesach, rather for a korban, just like Rabbah. Tana kavase de Rav Yosef. We have a brisa supporting Rav Yosef. Yachol yetze adam yidei chavasu b'chalas toda rikike nazir. It's possible that you can use for achilas matzah b'chalas of a toda or a nazir. Tamaloma shivas yom matzos tochelu. You have to eat matzahs for 7 days. Matzah nechelas shivas yomim. You need matzah that can be eaten for 7 days. Yotzes hazo, to the exclusion of toda and nazir she'einen nechelas shiva ela liyom v'layla, to the exclusion of these korbanos that are only eaten for 1 day and 1 night. Okay, very good. V'tepukli melechem oni. Interesting. So as Rashi points out, Rav Yosef doesn't disagree with Rabba. Rav Yosef agrees also that the matzah would have to be matzah shmura. It needs to be guarded for the intention of matzahs. However, Rav Yosef says in addition to that, it also needs to be eaten for 7 days. Now, the Gemara asks, why doesn't Rav Yosef, or I guess the Brisa, learn it out from lechem oni? Why do we have to learn it out from Shivas Yom that you have to eat matzahs for 7 days to the exclusion of these korbanos? But why don't we say, what about lechem oni? That it has to be poor man's bread. It can't be matzah ashira. And these korbanos have oil in them. And as we learned the other day, that if you have matzahs with oil in them, it would be considered matzah ashira. So why don't we learn it out from lechem oni? Mishenecho ba'anin. Oh, I got carried away there. Scratch that. We'll get back to that in a second. Lechem oni mishenecho ba'aninus. Right? So not like Rabbi Akiva said, lechem oni, that it needs to be poor man's bread, but like Rabbi Yossi Aglili was saying, that lechem oni, that it needs to be eaten by something, it has to be bread that you can eat ba'aninus when you're in onen. Yatza zo she'eno ne'echo ba'aninus ala b'simcha. It's the exclusion of these korbanos, that these korbanos you cannot eat when you're in onen, you can only eat them when you are happy. So that's how we know that you can't use the matzahs from a toda or a nazir. So the Gemara says, well, savar la Rabbi Akiva, that this brisa holds like Rabbi Akiva. Damar ani ksiv, that it says, right, ani, a poor person, poor man's bread. But you can, you don't necessarily have to be able to eat it as an onen. So that's why I need the pasuk by the korbanos, right? Well, that's why I need the pasuk say Shivas Yom for 7 days to the exclusion of the korbanos, which are only able to be eaten for 1 day. Fine. Where am I? But then, okay, even if you're Rabbi Akiva and you say it means poor man's bread, so then exclude these korbanos because they're rich man's bread, right? They have oil in them. So Amar Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, Reviyasi u'mischalekasi lecha machalis. Shmuel bar Yitzchak says, look, we're not talking about all that much oil over here. We're bringing 40 breads. We're bringing 40 breads with the korban toda, and you're dividing up a revius of wine among these lots of breads. So not wine, oil. Like, we're not really talking about such rich bread. So therefore, it wouldn't necessarily be an issue of matzah ashira. Okay, but why don't we learn it out that from the fact that these breads are not eaten b'chol moshavos, they're not able to be eaten anywhere. They have to be eaten in Jerusalem, and we need bread that can be eaten anywhere. So Amar Shlakish zosomeres chalas toder kikinozin echalim benov v'givon. Aha. So this teaches that the chalas of the toda and the nazir were able to be eaten in Nov and Givon. So what were Nov and Givon? Nov and Givon were these places where there was I don't know that the Mishkan was there, but there was Nov Ira Kohanim, right? There were these cities, there were different periods in Israel's history. There was let's say when the Mishkan was at Shiloh, and then at that place, you were unable to have bamas, your own private altars, wherever you wanted. But then there was a period where there was no Mishkan per se necessarily, but there was bama gedola, almost like a mizbeach, that they had in Nov, and also at a different time in Givon. So this wasn't exactly like a Mishkan or a Beis Hamikdash, but you're able to offer sacrifices there. So says Rish Lakish that this means, from the fact that we're not saying that the reason you're unable to use Chalos, Toda, and Rikika Nazir for matzah, right? We're not saying that the reason is because, we have to be able to eat it anywhere, and Chalos, Toda, and Rikika Nazir, you're unable to eat anywhere. From the fact that we're not saying that, it means that in Nov and in Givon you were able to eat Chalas, Toda, and Rikika Nazir. Okay, fine, very good. Okay, very good. So therefore we're saying that the reason why you can't use Chalas, Toda, and Rikika Nazir is because you need something that can be eaten for 7 days, and these aren't eaten for 7 days. Okay, none of those other reasons will suffice. Now, the Mishnah said, Nazir she'asan la'atzmo in ein adam yotzei, but that if you have a Nazir who made these, where am I? I skipped. Whoa, I skipped a lot. I skipped a ton. Okay, I just skipped a lot. Let me go back to where I should be. Tanya, we learn in the Brisa. Amar Bilai, says Rabbi Bilai, Sha'alti Rabbi Eliezer, I asked Rabbi Eliezer, Ma'u sheyetzei adam b'chalos toder kike nazir. So, can a person be yotzei? His mitzvah is chiyuv of achilas matzahs with chalos toder kike nazir. So Amar Lis, Rabbi Eliezer said, Lo shamati. He says, I don't know. Basi v'shalti l'fnei Rabbi Yoshua. So it says Rabbi Eli, so I asked Rabbi Yoshua. Amrli, he said to me, Arei Amru, they said, Chalos toda rikike nazir shasan la'atzmo ein adam yotzei boen. So Rabbi Yoshua said, look, the Mishnah said, the halacha is that if a nazir, with the chalos toda or kike nazir, that a person who had to offer these korbanos made them for him, meaning to be for himself to use for these korbanos, well then you'd be unable to use them for your chiyuv achilas matzos. Limkor b'shuk, but if he prepared these matzos to sell in the market for people who need, lachmi toda or kike nazir, so then yotzei ben. So then you can use them for matzah. Okay, zeu. So Rabbi Eli says that he asked Rabbi Eliezer, what's the deal with lachmi toda and kike nazir? He says, I don't know. He asked Rabbi Yoshua, and he basically quoted him the Mishnah, which is that if you made them for his own use, you cannot use them for your chiyuv matzos. If you made them to sell, then you can use them for chiyuv matzos. So then when I went back to Rabbi Eliezer and I told him what Rabbi Yoshua said, said Amrli, he said to me, Bris, he said, Wawawiwa, Heinei nadvarim shenemru lo Moshe b'Sinai. This is mamish exactly what was told to Moshe at Har Sinai. Amazing. Ikadar, those who say, Bris, Wawawiwa, Heinei nadvarim shenemru lo Moshe b'Sinai v'lo taimei ba'aya. Rabbi Eliezer says, duh, like I could have told you that. But the point is, what Rabbi Yeshua is just telling you stuff without giving a reason for it? Like, why? That's what I'm interested in, says Rabbi Eliezer. But why? Yeah, I know that Chalos Toda and Kike Nazir, if you made them for themselves, if you made them for yourself, you cannot use them for Achilas Matzah. And if you made them to sell in the shuk, you can. But why? What's the difference? Doesn't what? So he says, what is this halacha l'Moshe Misidai that we don't have to give a reason for it? Like, what's the deal? So v'taimamai. So what is the distinction? So Amar Rabba says, Rabba called the shuk imluche mimlech Amar imizdab ilo mizdab neipakbu ana. So Rabba explains, you know what the difference is? The difference is that when you make these lachmi toda or kike nazir to sell, well, in the back of your mind, you know, well, if I don't sell them, then okay, at least I'll have some matzahs for Pesach. So you can consider it that it is somewhat lishma. Whereas if you make it for yourself, I mean, you're not thinking, what if I don't use it? What do you mean? I'm making them to use for a toda, or if he's a nazir, for a kike nazir, so then he doesn't really have any intention to be using them for matzah. So that is, for kilu matzah and Pesach. That is the distinction. Okay, well that was daf Lamed Ches of Masechta Pesachim. Let's go over a few things. Ownership of mayser sheni, right? So we had a distinction between Reb Meir and the Chacham. Reb Meir says that mayser is mammon gavoa, belongs to God, doesn't belong to you. If it doesn't belong to you, so then you'd be unable to use this, or Rav Asi wants to allege that you would therefore be able to unable to use mayser sheni for a number of things according to Reb Meir, such as esrig, who could tell me what else? Matzah, it would be patur from challah. The Chacham say that mayser sheni is not mammon gavoa, and therefore you can use it for all these things. Talking about challah of mayser sheni versus, right, and challah that was of dough that was purchased with money of mayser sheni, can you use that for matzahs in the end, assuming that you're a Kohen and you can eat challah? So in the end, Rava says, yeah, all mayser sheni you can use for matzah, and if it's challah, or if it's, food that was bought with money of mayser sheni and you made that into challah, all good. Then we talked about matzahs from the toda and the nazir. So in Machlokas Rabba and Rav Yosef, so our Mishnah, of course, had said that you're unable to use matzahs from a korban toda or a kike nazir. The question is why? So Rabba said, well, because it says Ushmartem mitzvah matzahs, you have to guard the matzahs. Now these you're not guarding for matzahs, you're guarding for nazir, toda, so therefore you can't use it for matzah. Rav Yosef says, it says that Shivas Yom Tochlu matzahs, you have to eat matzahs for 7 days. These korbanos you're only eating for 1 day, so therefore it won't work. We asked all sorts of questions. Why not learn it out from Lechem Oni, other places? We were unsuccessful in learning out from other places. That's why we have to learn it out from Shivas Yom Tochlu matzahs. And then we discussed at the end the distinction between how come when you write by the Lachmi Toda and the Kike Nazir, if you make it for yourself, you cannot use it for Pesach, but if you make it to sell in the shuk, you can. And the answer is, because Rabbah says that the answer is because when you make it to sell, in the back of your mind, you know that if you don't sell it, then at least you'll have matzahs from Pesach for Pesach. So it would be considered like you made them, you're guarding them with the intention of matzahs on Pesach. That was Daf Lamed Ches. I hope you enjoyed very much. Peace out.